This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Mag Gupta.
Chapter 23. The Citadel. The Citadel had reconvened every day over the past 5 days, during which Felthor gave the funds to resupply Islesfield. His accounts were vast, so he barely felt the loss. It had not taken long for Felthor and Alistair to see where their support lay. Fortunately, it seemed to have increased over the previous few days. Many of the lords of the Citadel had lands along the coast, and Felthor's victory against the nameless fleet master had gained a great amount of sympathy. Also, the unity between Decimus and Alistair had brought up a fainter ray of hope between the younger of the nobles, foolishly thinking that Ignatius and Alistair would now think alike. In some regards they did, but those foolish boys were quickly turned wise. It was this subject that Felthor and Alistair had met to discuss. Felthor had a small manor house in the third quarter of the city, and he, Alistair and Aquila were in council. Alistair was lounging in a rocking chair, and it was clear that he wanted out of the house and the subject of their meeting. Aquila and Felthor were both smoking pipes, but the suffocating mass of smoke that lined the ceiling did little to ease Alistair's mood. Aquila was in good spirits, his wise face glowing with a smile despite the pipe in his mouth. "Our support is uneven," Felthor stated. "We need to solidify what we have." "But our support is higher than before," Aquila protested. "We've benefited from every vote since your arrival." "Only because of circumstance," Alistair put in. "The men who have turned on Ignatius have only turned because our decisions favor their pockets. We need to have men on our side that we can count on, and count on in the long term. How do we win their support?" "Money is generally a good place to begin," Felthor explained. "Many of the new members of the court are young and without title. Boys who are only there because their fathers are rich and famous." "Wouldn't they already have money?" Aquila asked. "Their fathers would have money," Felthor elaborated. "Their own pockets would be running low, and they have been taxed just as any other man. They may be wealthy, but they are far from rich." "We could pay off the debts of the councilmen," Alistair suggested, "then organize some kind of long-term repayment." "Do we have the money for something so extravagant?" Aquila queried. "Of course," Felthor puffed out a cloud of smoke. "The young men are inexperienced in haggling. The bribes would not be as much as for the older members." "Like when we tried to bribe the high priest," Alistair scoffed. "You'd think he was the Golden King himself." Aquila's smile had disappeared and was now turning into unease. "What is it, my friend?" "We talk of bribery and buying loyalty. I had hoped we would win the kingdom through more honorable means." "As had we all," Alistair nodded sympathetically. "We are not men of cruelty, but of chivalry. The kingdom that we will build will be one of hope and kindness. But the men of the ancient empire came with swords in hand and conquest in their heart. Those men are not remembered as monsters, but heroes, because they ruled with just hands. Remember, we are being forced into this problem. Our scouts report that Ignatius's pirate force has agreed to his attack, and we need to act." Aquila remained unconvinced. He extinguished his pipe. "That invasion would not be coming if you had not been conspiring to reinforce the coast." "My coast," Alistair said firmly. "Come," he beckoned, and led them to the balcony. He crossed the long room in half as many strides as the others, and was keenly breathing in the open air when they arrived to meet him. "Look at all of those people," He pointed vaguely at the market district and the tiny black pinpricks of people moving around. They do not care for who sits on the high throne. What they want is a fruitful summer, a short winter, money in their pockets, a warm bed to sleep in, and someone to share it with. As long as we provide them with that, they will be content. Is that truly what you think of the people you mean to rule? Aquila asked, slightly taken aback by Alistair's pessimism. Yes, Alistair said, and he wasn't ashamed of his answer. I am a prince of Seaward. A man who lives in the gutter may look up at me in awe when he hears of my victory in some battle, but that news will not ease his discomfort, put food in his belly, or shelter him from the cold. Only nobility cares about nobility. Aquila wasn't convinced, but kings can move men. They obey him and follow his laws. Only because they fear what happens if they don't. They love their food and riches too much to risk it. Kings that are loved inspire loyalty, and those that are not loved must learn to be manipulative. Those kings are the most dangerous, as they can turn the mood of any kingdom against their enemies, regardless of their feelings. What sort of leader would you say you are? Aquila asked. The latter, I hope, Alistair smirked. Better to be dangerous than dead. Felthor let out a huge puff of smoke. His eyes gazed out to the east, to the mass expanse of forest and mountains. Just as long as we win, it will not matter. Yes, indeed. Alistair turned away to face Felthor. Should we organize who will be doing what in the aftermath? Let us do that later. Felthor shook his head. First, we need our victory. I'd rather not tempt fate. No, Aquila objected. I have heard much of plotting and kings. I would hear how our kingdom would be better than the stewardship. Felthor looked reluctant, but Alistair placed a hand on his shoulder. It is a legitimate question. He leaned back on the stone balcony. My family would be the High King of the realm. The king's heir would be Julius until his time to ascend the throne. Decimus would remain the steward after Ignatius, and Felthor will be the supreme commander of the armies, the Magnus Consul of the kingdom, until the end of his life. In other words, Felthor jested, back to my old job. Alistair scoffed. You, my lord, he said to Aquila, will take any position you please. I feel the censor for the kingdom would be a good position for you. He was referring to the office that maintained ethical standards and treasury of the kingdom. You would be equal in rank to each of us. May I not take the stewardship for myself? Aquila said, more to himself than any other. Alistair sensed what he had said, no matter how quietly he said it. The stewardship is Decimus's birthright, as it will be my grandson's. With Seaward and the stewardship under my family's control, there will be little to dispute my ascension to the throne. Your ascension, Aquila said. Are you an heir to the royal line? Alistair let out a bored grunt. The line of kings has long been broken. It was a dead subject from his point of view. There are none left of that line in the kingdom. The princes of Seaward are descendants of royalty in a way that is matched by no one else in the world. If there is to be a king, there are none more suited than the princes of Seaward. When the entire Valen's line had been defeated by the Goths, the princes would have taken command of the realm. The only thing that stopped us was infighting. Had those men made peace, the kingdom would be very different. The princes saved the kingdom in the first exitum, and it is that line that ruled when the crown cowered away from the Orc menace. I am the Prince of Seaward now, and it shall be my name that rules. Aquila was disquieted by this. He was a believer in the legend of the divinity of kings, in which kings were comparable to gods. But even those kings were only men. made up of marriages to what would be considered lesser families. After reflecting upon this, he could see Alistair's interpretation and how it could be worked to be successful. Nevertheless, he was silent for a long time. "So, my lord," Falthor spoke up, after Alistair's rant on Greek supremacy came to an end, "what would you want in this kingdom we are creating? What position would be good enough to prove to the father of your lady love?" "I want it all," Aquila said. "Only a kingdom would be enough." "A man who wants everything is easy to work with," Alistair scoffed, satisfyingly. "And I thought you were a man of humble character," Falthor sighed. Aquila shook his head. "It does not matter in the end," he sighed sadly. "The people would never accept me as someone at the top. The people do not know me, and I have no recognized claim to a throne. What position could I have if not the stewardship, the king, or the commander of the kingdom's armies?" "In Rome there is always a place for ambition," Falthor stated, after a long moment. He wasn't impressed by Aquila's greed. "Wars allow for conquest. We could forge a kingdom for you. Name you the Prince of the North or the South, like in the days of old. But be careful, my lord. You begin to ask for too much." "Is it too much to ask for an equal share of this company?" "He does have a point," Alistair agreed. "Turgon has been a member of our company far longer than Aquila." Falthor shook his head. "All he asks for is a governorship in the realm to retire to, and he has been the company's most loyal member." "Turgon has simple tastes," Alistair retorted, "and his contribution to our cause is little in comparison to what Aquila has promised." "He has brought nearly 4,000 men to our forces," Falthor protested, his tone turning dark. "Nearly the entire First Legion is comprised of men he has found and brought to our employ. Do you call that nothing?" "I did not say it was nothing," Alistair said, defiantly. "I simply mean that Aquila will provide us with the politic to get started against our enemies." "Then what title will you give him?" Falthor snapped. He was angry now and was making no show of hiding it. "I do not know," Alistair said. "We shall think on it," he said to Aquila. "Come, I feel we have overstayed our welcome." "I feel so too," Falthor said. "I bid you good day, my friends, and I shall see you on the morrow." They weren't the only ones scheming in politics. Ignatius was in the market district. It was a flame-lit evening. The shop stalls were pushed away, and the entertainment stages were erected to provide stories of all genres and topics. The afternoon had been filled with comedy and drama, but now that night was falling, the topics had changed to glory and battles. Even from here, he could hear the sounds of the lower quarters of the city, where the stages were those of wickedness and lewdness. He was a man of few feelings, and the entertainment did nothing to ease his sullenness. No one noticed him. He had his hood over his head, and the 3 citadel guardsmen, though still heavily armored, were equally incognito. It was easy for him to find his man. Captain General Tathar was sitting on the front row to a stage, a mug of ale in his hand. This stage was well known as one to represent the sexual in an honourable way, if there was one. In this case, though, they didn't seem to be doing a good job. The show was of Seaward's heroism in the first exitum, in honour of Alistair's attempts to lower the tax in the kingdom. The story was of how the first prince married an elven priestess to gain her troops for the coming war. The woman playing the priestess was naked, save for brass covers that only just covered her nipples and the occasional brass necklace and bracelet. The prince was dressed in blue silk, but had a limp, penis-shaped object the size of a man's arm dangling in between his legs. Ignatius frowned up at the stage, clearly disapproving of the nudity. He made his presence known to the general. Tathar looked around, with an exhale, into his drink. "My lord," he greeted, his tone curious more than polite. Ignatius sat next to him. His guardsmen shadowed them. "I had not taken you for a man of the stage." "I am not," Ignatius grunted. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "There are no pleasant journeys," Tathar grumbled, turning back to the stage. "There's less wine and much danger." He drank his mug and signaled to have it filled. "Well then, we will have to ensure that there are vast amounts of wine in your future post." "Is that why you have summoned me?" Tathar scowled, his tone suspicious rather than enthusiastic. "I am to have a command again." "Indeed," Ignatius said, "and hopefully we can turn this command into something which will regain your glory and honor." "I was not aware it needed regaining," Tathar said slowly, as if trying to weed out a confession from Ignatius. "If you are to best Falthor, you will need all you can get," Ignatius said, just as slowly as Tathar. "And why would I want to best Falthor?" Tathar's eyes were on the woman's privates, which she was revealing as she leant seductively over the prop that was the prince's bed. "Because he is placing the realm in danger," Ignatius stated. "He and his friend, the prince, seek to destroy the realm to make trouble for me and the council. If we are to save my kingdom, we will need the greatest commander." Tathar laughed, so loudly it stopped the show for a moment. "I am not the man I was. Falthor is no friend of mine, but I care not for your kingdom. You chose him over me, and you will pay for that in whichever way you can." "You may find that is a dangerous thing to say," Ignatius smirked, signaling irritably for the show to continue. "When the lines are drawn, I will need to know which side you are on." "Sides," Tathar spat disdainfully, and then grunted into his drink. "I care not for sides. You highborns think that only one man can rule the world. I will have no part in your game. Not with you or Falthor or Alistair. All of you have crossed me, and I do not forgive." Ignatius was not surprised by this. "That is all very well," he said, even though in his mind it wasn't. "But when the time comes, there will be no neutrality. You will find your side is chosen for you, and you will have to choose for the sake of your life." "Your threats mean little to me." Tathar waved a hand in boredom. "Your guards are all armed with longswords, and the longsword is useless at such close quarters. I could stab you in the neck or the wrist before they could finish unsheathing their blades, so be careful who you threaten." He pushed his cloak away and revealed the golden hilt of a sharp dirk. "Perhaps we were wrong to consider you a worthy captain for our forces in this campaign," Ignatius said coldly, his eyes drifting to the hilt, more as if it was something he could acquire than be afraid of. "You clearly are not the man you once were." He made to leave. "Careful who you insult," Tathar snapped. "I need only take a shit, and legions will force their way out of that woman's slit if I demand it. If you doubt me, then I shall prove you wrong to do so." Ignatius was amused by this. Tathar was quite drunk now and was slopping his drink all over himself. "We shall see," he said, looking down at the wretch that was his man. "Just remember which hand keeps you fed and watered," he added. He threw a small money bag to the general. "The citadel convenes at 10 o'clock. Be washed and sober in time for that." It was too much to hope that Tathar would manage both, but he managed to come washed, so he didn't stink of the wine he had drowned himself in. The council admitted him to the hall, and he staggered in, blinking at the light streaming in through the window. Alistair couldn't help but laugh at the sight. This was Ignatius's champion, and he was something of a disgrace to himself and his house. It was hard to believe that he was considered a hero of the kingdom who had defeated nearly limitless armies of southerners to maintain the kingdom's colonies. Falthor showed slightly more respect. Tathar had written many books and other scholarly works that had shaped Falthor's career. His attempts to show his respect, however, did nothing to change Tathar's opinion on him. Falthor's face fell. He had regretted that his rise had cost Tathar's position, but it couldn't be helped. Ex-Consul Tathar, Ignatius greeted. "Welcome to the Citadel." "Thank you," Tathar grunted, looking around. "There are many new faces since when I was last here." Ignatius scoffed, and Decimus continued the talk. "You have been summoned to take command of the relief force of Ferus to defend the realm against the forces of Gladium as they rape and pillage the coast. Your command will be reinstated, and you will have the respect and honor of the realm that you had in your prime. Do you accept the terms?" "I care not for respect and honor. I long to command men in battle again. War is my mistress, and I have been without her for too long." "Very well," Decimus said. A simple yes would have done. There was a slight chorus of laughter around the hall. "You shall be assigned a contingent of 2,000 men," Aquila read from a scroll. 300 militia bowmen, 1,500 shielded warriors, and 200 horsemen. Alistair's laughter vanished from his face. It was more than what Falthor had given, and it would make Tathar the more powerful leader over Julius, as he would have more men behind him. It was something they had not imagined Ignatius would do, as the more men he would have to pay for would drain his precious treasury. He looked at Falthor. Realization was in his eyes too. They both looked at Aquila, who looked back at them with a devilish expression. Falthor could see the pride in Ignatius's eyes, but he was not as abashed by this as Alistair was. Tathar would be commanding raw recruits, fresh off of the training block and with no experience in war. The men under Falthor's command at Ferus were all veterans and worth 2 of every man in Tathar's company. This balanced things out. Julius and the Swan were great commanders, tried and tested, whereas Tathar had been out of combat for years. Also, the men being mustered under Tathar would need to be trained and equipped, which would take time. Once he reflected on this, the initial shock was lifted, but Alistair remained worried. The motion was carried on the matter, and the ceremony of command was given to Tathar in the symbolic form of the gold and wooden short sword. The citadel began to rumble with applause as he held it above his head. Alistair and Falthor applauded with them. They used the noise to talk. "Send word to Julius," Alistair commanded. "He must win a victory before Tathar and his men arrive." "Yes, indeed," Falthor muttered. "We have much to be thankful for." He was looking darkly at Aquila, who was in deep conversation with Ignatius. Alistair nodded. "I would be happy to find out who is behind this betrayal." "We both know who is behind this, my friend," Falthor said sadly, seeing Aquila smirk at him. "The question is, what do we do about it?"